There is a piece of land roughly the size of New Jersey that has been fought over for more than 3 millennia. It was conquered by the Romans, the Crusaders, the Ottomans, and the British. Then, in 1948, a nation was reconstituted after a 2,000-year absence. The outcome was decided by a razor-thin margin. In 1947, the United Nations drafted Resolution 181, a plan to partition the territory of Palestine into 2 distinct states, one Jewish, one Arab. This data visualization shows the actual margin of that decision. Resolution 181 passed 33-13. Changing the minds of just a handful of those voting nations erases the resolution entirely. If those votes swing the other way, David Ben-Gurion never steps to the podium on May 14, 1948, to declare the State of Israel. The region remains entirely open, and we have to ask what forces rush in to fill that geopolitical void. Removing Israel does not leave a blank slate. It instantly triggers a demographic and territorial chain reaction that redefines 20th century borders and alliances. The most immediate consequence hits Europe. By 1948, an estimated 700,000 Jewish Holocaust survivors are languishing in displaced persons camps. They are stateless, exhausted, and possess nowhere to return to. Without Israel, they have no destination. The United States enforces strict quotas under the Immigration Act of 1924, and Britain's 1939 White Paper actively caps Jewish immigration. Western nations effectively block these refugees from seeking asylum. Across the Middle East, ancient Jewish communities predating modern Israel by centuries face their own crisis. Without a national refuge, populations in Jerusalem, Baghdad, and Cairo become vulnerable minorities in an increasingly hostile, volatile region. Erasing Israel compounds the human cost of the Holocaust, guaranteeing that hundreds of thousands of survivors remain trapped in a prolonged, unresolvable global refugee crisis. A common assumption is that removing Israel automatically creates an independent, sovereign Palestine. The historical record shows otherwise. Every Arab nation voted against the UN Partition Plan. They rejected the creation of a Palestinian state alongside a Jewish one. Look at this map of the 1948 Middle East. Without Israeli resistance, Jordan's Arab Legion annexes the West Bank. Egypt pushes north from Gaza. The territory fractures into competing military zones among Syria, Iraq, Egypt, and Jordan, leaving local populations as stateless subjects. Erasing Israel does not grant Palestinian sovereignty. It merely transfers the occupation of their land to competing Arab regimes. Globally, the absence of Israel redraws the entire Cold War chessboard. The United States loses its primary democratic foothold in a strategically vital region. Into this strategic void steps the Soviet Union. The USSR aggressively courts Arab socialist governments, surging unchecked into Egypt and Syria. Pan-Arab nationalism, led by figures like Egypt's Gamal Abdel Nasser, dominates the region with Soviet backing. This creates direct economic shocks. The 1973 Arab oil embargo was directly triggered by American support for Israel during the Yom Kippur War. Take away Israel and the embargo never happens. The 1970s global economy avoids a crippling energy crisis. But the West trades short-term economic health for a long-term strategic nightmare, ceding immense leverage over the world's oil supply to the Soviet sphere of influence. Many argue that erasing the Israeli-Palestinian conflict would pacify the Middle East, removing a primary driver of regional tension. But the vacuum of that conflict is immediately filled by deep, pre-existing fault lines. The Muslim Brotherhood was founded in Egypt 20 years before Israel existed. The ideological battle between political Islam and secular Arab dictatorships and the centuries-old Sunni-Shia divide drive the region's instability independent of Zionism. The 1980 Iran-Iraq War killed 500,000 people. The modern Syrian civil war displaced millions. The scale of these conflicts is entirely independent of Israel. Removing the State of Israel does not eradicate radicalization or violence. It simply changes the combatants and shifts the epicenters of the bloodshed. There is a modern cost to this timeline, too. Israel has a population of under 10 million people, yet it maintains an outsized role as one of the world's primary innovation engines. Looking at this data, we see over $25 billion in annual tech exports. Key components of Intel processors, the USB flash drive, modern navigation systems like Waze, These everyday global technologies either vanish from the timeline entirely or are severely delayed. In medicine, the world loses capsule endoscopy, the pill cam used in over 80 countries, along with vital cancer research breakthroughs and advanced drip irrigation systems that feed millions across arid climates. Erasing the nation also erases the research hubs and patents underpinning modern global connectivity and health. An alternate timeline without Israel presents stark trade-offs. The West avoids decades of military entanglements and bypasses the 1970s oil crisis, but pays for it with unchecked Soviet expansion, wide-scale technological gaps, and widespread statelessness for Holocaust survivors. The hardest truth of this counterfactual is that taking Israel off the map does not grant Palestinians a state. It merely hands their lands to the occupying forces of Jordan, Egypt, and Syria. In reality, both Israeli and Palestinian families possess genuine historical validity. Both share a deep connection to the ancient land, and both have endured immense, deeply real pain. Pretending one side doesn't exist is a fantasy that solves nothing. The only mature path forward is dealing with the complex, fractured world we actually have.